Malik Johnson sat in his sleek, glass-walled office, the city skyline stretching endlessly beyond his window. Normally, the view filled him with pride, a testament to his empire, his vision. But today it felt empty, hollow. His eyes were fixed on the report in front of him, his fingers gripping the edges a little too tightly. Employee satisfaction had plummeted, a brutal 15% drop for the third month in a row at one of his Virginia offices. And it wasn't just the numbers. The complaints stacked on his desk painted a far uglier picture. Claims of toxic leadership, blatant favoritism, and whispers of racism. Red flags. Warnings. This wasn't just a bad quarter. This was a crisis. And Malik knew that spreadsheets and boardroom discussions wouldn't give him the real story.
So he made a decision.
A drastic one. Disguising himself as a low-level receptionist, he was going to step into the very halls of his company. Not as a CEO, but as an outsider. To see, hear, and feel what his employees lived every single day. It was a risk. If anyone found out, it could spiral into a PR disaster. His credibility could shatter overnight. But as he buttoned up the dull, standard-issue uniform, adjusting a fake mustache in the mirror, he felt something stir inside him. Hope. This was his chance to fix what was broken. Stepping into the building he had once ruled from above, he felt a strange sense of disconnection. No one looked up. No nods of recognition. He wasn't the CEO today. He was just another nameless employee. And for the first time, he understood what that meant. Then came the real test, manning the front desk. The phone rang relentlessly. Visitors came and went. And in the midst of it all, his ears caught a conversation between two senior managers nearby. "Did you see the email about those efficiency measures?" One scoffed.
"Yeah.
Just what we needed. More work, less pay." The other replied, rolling his eyes. "Customer service is already drowning." "Well, not our problem. Let HR deal with the complaints. We've got bigger things to focus on." The casual indifference hit Malik like a punch to the gut. Was this what his leadership had bred? Had he, even unintentionally, allowed this culture to thrive? The deeper he sank into the day, the heavier the weight became. The tasks that once seemed insignificant, answering calls, guiding visitors, making coffee, now revealed a much darker truth. In the break room, he caught another conversation. His management team, the people he had entrusted to uphold his vision, spoke about employees with nothing but contempt. "They whine too much," one of them sneered. "If they don't like it, they can leave." Laughter followed. And then the final dagger. A slur. A crude joke. A complete dismissal of the people who kept this company running. Malik clenched his jaw.
Shame.
Anger. Disbelief. This wasn't just a bad office. This was rot, running deep into the foundation of everything he had built. And for the first time, he wondered, had he been blind to it all along? As the day came to a close, one thing was certain. Malik had come looking for the truth, and he had found it. Now, what was he going to do about it? Malik found an unexpected ally in Doris, a seasoned receptionist who had seen it all. Patiently, she guided him through the chaotic rhythm of the front desk. During their break, she gave him a knowing smile and leaned in. "It's just a job," she said with a shrug. "But don't expect anyone up there to notice us. To them, we're invisible." Her words hit Malik harder than he expected. Invisible. He had always prided himself on building a company where every employee felt valued and where hard work didn't go unnoticed. But in just one sentence, Doris had shattered that illusion. By the time his shift ended, his body ached from the unfamiliar demands of the job. But the real exhaustion? That was in his mind. Stripping off the uniform, he studied his reflection in the mirror. He looked different. Not just tired, but changed. He had gone undercover to find ways to improve his company. Instead, he had uncovered something far worse, a culture of disregard that ran deeper than he had ever imagined. The next morning, he returned to his receptionist role, hoping, naively, that his first day had been an anomaly. But as the day unfolded, it became clear this was the norm. From his station at the front desk, he observed everything. The way employees carried themselves, the way conversations unfolded, the quiet moments of tension spoke louder than words. And then there was Linda. Linda was a key member of the Virginia management team, highly praised by the board for her efficiency, her sharp business mind, and her no-nonsense leadership. Malik had heard nothing but good things about her. But the Linda he witnessed today was not the leader he had been told about. She spoke to lower-level employees with an air of superiority, her words clipped and laced with condescension. There was no encouragement, no collaboration, just commands, criticisms, and a barely veiled disdain. Then it happened. Linda stormed up to the front desk, eyes scanning the area like a general inspecting a battlefield. She let out an exaggerated sigh, her gaze locking onto Malik. "Is this seriously how you're handling things?" she snapped. "I've never seen such a disaster at the front desk. Papers everywhere, phones ringing off the hook, and you can't even answer them on time. No wonder this place is falling apart. It's because you people can't even do the basics, right? You people." The words rang in Malik's ears, sharp as a blade. You people? What exactly did that mean? A slow, simmering anger built inside him. He had spent years building this company with the belief that respect and dignity were non-negotiable. And yet, here was one of his senior managers, tearing into him, not just for a minor inconvenience, but for simply existing in a role she deemed beneath her. Linda turned on her heel and marched off, completely unaware of the storm she had just set off in Malik's mind. Nearby, an IT worker named Henry exchanged a knowing glance with a colleague. With a small, resigned shake of his head, he muttered, "Don't take it personally. That's just how she is. That's just how she is." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Not only was Linda's behavior unacceptable, but it was normalized, expected, ignored. And if no one had stopped her by now, that meant he had let it happen. For the rest of the day, Malik observed her even more closely. He saw how employees shrank under her gaze and how conversations shifted when she entered a room. Some people tensed up, others avoided eye contact entirely. The office air felt thick, with fear, resentment, and a silent understanding that nothing would change. And then there was the most disturbing pattern of all. Linda knew how to wear a mask. When speaking to department heads, she was poised, polished, and professional. The leader Malik had been told she was. But the second she turned her attention downward, to those she deemed unimportant, the mask dropped. And that's when Malik realized the truth. This wasn't just about Linda. This was about a culture that had festered under his watch. And that was on him. But the more Malik watched, the more he realized Linda's two-faced behavior wasn't just a personal failing. It was a cancer eating away at the company from the inside. In meetings with senior leadership, she composed and articulated the picture of professionalism. But the moment she turned to those she saw as beneath her, that mask fell away, revealing someone who ruled through intimidation and condescension. And the worst part? No one had stopped her. The betrayal Malik felt ran deep. This was someone his leadership team had trusted, someone he had believed reflected the values he wanted for TechVision. But now, standing behind the reception desk, he saw the truth. His team's judgment had been wrong. Worse, his judgment had failed. As the day came to an end, Malik's mind was restless. The problems in this office ran far deeper than just one bad manager. This wasn't an isolated issue, it was systemic. A culture of fear, favoritism, of talent being ignored while toxicity thrived. And the weight of that realization sat heavily on his shoulders. But amidst the dysfunction, he also saw something unexpected.
Hope.
From his spot at the front desk, Malik began to notice people he had overlooked before. Not just the loud voices that commanded meetings or the ones who played office politics, but the real backbone of TechVision, the people who worked tirelessly, often without recognition. Two employees in particular stood out. Angela, a senior accountant, was the first. At first glance, she seemed like just another diligent worker, buried in spreadsheets and financial reports. But as Malik observed her, he realized she was something more. One of those rare people who held everything together, even when no one was looking. One evening, as the office emptied and the hum of conversation faded, Malik overheard a quiet exchange. "Angela, you're still here?" a coworker asked, surprised. Angela looked up, rubbing her tired eyes. "Just finishing the quarterly reports," she said with a small smile. "They need to be perfect for the board meeting tomorrow. But it's your daughter's recital tonight, right?" For a moment, something flickered across Angela's face. Regret.
Guilt.
Then she forced a chuckle. "I'll make it up to her this weekend." The colleague gave a sympathetic nod before leaving, but Malik stayed frozen in place. He had always believed in rewarding hard work. But how many employees like Angela had been sacrificing their personal lives while the ones at the top coasted by? And then there was Henry. Henry from IT had an entirely different kind of presence. He wasn't just good at fixing computers, he was good at fixing moods. Everywhere Malik looked, Henry was there, offering a patient smile, cracking a joke, making the workplace a little lighter. One afternoon, Malik witnessed something that stuck with him. A young intern, overwhelmed and on the verge of tears, sat helpless in front of a frozen computer. Panic was written all over her face. Then Henry appeared. "All right, let's figure this out together," he said, pulling up a chair beside her. For the next hour, he walked her through troubleshooting, not just fixing the problem, but teaching her how to handle it herself. By the end, she wasn't just relieved, she was confident. Malik had spent years building this company, but here, in the small, unnoticed corners, were the people who truly embodied the values he had always preached. Angela, who worked tirelessly with no recognition. Henry made the office a better place simply by being in it. And yet, neither of them were in leadership. Neither of them had been given the opportunities they deserved.
Why?
That question haunted Malik. Then, one afternoon, he overheard Angela venting quietly to a coworker. "I've been passed over for promotion 3 times now," she said, frustration laced in her voice. "I work hard. I do everything right. But it doesn't matter if you're not in the right social circle." Her words struck Malik like a slap. He had always believed that effort should be rewarded and that talent should rise to the top. But now he was starting to see the cracks in the system he had built. Maybe the problem wasn't just the toxic managers. Maybe the real issue was him. Henry's situation was different from Angela's, but just as frustrating. Despite his expertise, patience, and ability to handle high-level crises, he remained in a junior role. His true potential was wasted. One afternoon, Malik watched as Henry single-handedly resolved a major technical failure, something that should have been escalated to senior IT staff. But no one above him had even noticed. How many others like him were hidden in plain sight. By the end of his undercover week, Malik had reached a sobering conclusion. TechVision was filled with untapped talent, people like Angela and Henry, who worked tirelessly without recognition. The amount of wasted potential was staggering. Now, Malik faced a new challenge. How could he fix a system that overlooked its best people? How could he ensure that talent and dedication were rewarded, regardless of office politics or social connections? There was only one way forward. It was time for a reckoning. The meeting. Malik called an emergency meeting with his board and senior management team. As he walked into the boardroom, not as a receptionist, but as Malik Johnson, CEO, the room fell silent. His presence alone demanded attention. The executives exchanged glances, some confused, others wary. They had no idea what was coming. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Malik began, his voice steady but firm. "There are serious issues in this company, issues we can no longer ignore." A hush settled over the room. "I've spent the past week undercover in our offices, working at the reception desk, walking the same halls as our employees. And what I saw was both eye-opening and deeply concerning. He let the words sink in. A few nervous shifts in seats. A couple of hushed whispers. Then he dropped the hammer. Our culture is broken, he stated. Employee satisfaction has dropped by 15%. There's widespread favoritism, and some of our most dedicated people, like Angela in accounting and Henry in IT, are being ignored, while toxic leadership thrives. A thick tension filled the room. Linda, the very manager he had watched belittle employees all week, sat rigidly in her seat. She wasn't alone. Several others fidgeted, their discomfort clear. We are failing our people, Malik continued, his tone sharper. And if we don't fix it, we're going to lose them. Some executives looked down, guilty. Others tried to justify their actions, murmuring excuses about efficiency and chain of command. Malik wasn't having it. This ends today. He laid out his plan. A new performance system where promotions were based on merit, not favoritism. A transparent feedback process to ensure employees had a voice. A zero-tolerance policy for toxic leadership. It was a bold move. Some resisted. Others nodded in agreement. Malik knew change wouldn't come easy, but he wasn't backing down. Then, just as he thought the hard part was over, an unexpected knock on his office door sent a chill down his spine. The confession. Linda stood there, her face pale, hands trembling. Mr. Johnson, she began hesitantly. I need to tell you something. About the complaints. About the toxic culture. Malik folded his arms. Go on. She swallowed hard. We've been manipulated. Malik's heartbeat quickened. What do you mean? Linda took a deep breath. The drop in morale, the complaints, the tension, it's not just internal issues. Someone is working against us. Someone feeding misinformation. Stirring up trouble from the outside. Before Malik could respond, Linda's phone buzzed violently in her hand. She glanced at the screen, and her face turned ghost white. Oh no, she whispered. It's happening again. She handed him her phone. On the screen was a live security feed from the main office floor. Malik's stomach dropped. The footage showed an unknown figure, dressed in black, face hidden beneath a hoodie and mask, moving through the empty office. Whoever they weren't supposed to be there. The security footage revealed a chilling scene. The hooded figure moved from one cubicle to another, leaning in close, whispering, and pointing at something on their phone screen. Employee after employee stiffened, their expressions shifting from shock to fear. Some nodded reluctantly. Others buried their faces in their hands. What the hell is he doing? Malik muttered. Linda's face was pale. Threatening them, she whispered. He's using their secrets against them. Blackmail. Manipulation. That's why people have been acting strangely. Why they've been making mistakes and turning against each other. Malik's blood ran cold. If this was true, then TechVision's problems weren't just internal dysfunction. Someone was deliberately sabotaging them, weaponizing fear to create chaos. Before he could process it, another knock came at the door. A tall man in a sharp suit stepped inside, his expression grim. Malik recognized him immediately. Oliver Grant, one of the best corporate investigators in the business. "I got an anonymous tip," Oliver said, setting his briefcase down. "Someone is sabotaging your company from the inside. And they know exactly how to make it look like leadership is failing." Malik clenched his jaw. "You have proof?" Oliver nodded and opened the briefcase. Inside were files, screenshots, and reports, each one painting a damning picture. "The sabotage traces back to a former employee," Oliver explained. "Someone you trusted. Someone who knew Tech Vision inside and out." Malik flipped through the documents, and his stomach dropped. A name stared back at him. A name he never expected. "This can't be right," he murmured. It was a former executive, someone Malik had worked closely with, someone who had once been part of Tech Vision's leadership. They had been let go under controversial circumstances, but no one had suspected they'd retaliate like this. "They've been pulling strings from the shadows," Oliver continued, "using a network of informants, leaking false reports, and blackmailing employees to create chaos." Malik exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. This wasn't just corporate sabotage. This was personal. And it wasn't over yet. The reckoning. The days that followed were filled with tense meetings, legal battles, and difficult confrontations. First, Malik dealt with the insiders who had aided the sabotage. Some, like Linda, had willingly participated, bullying employees, covering up misconduct, and enabling toxicity. Others had been forced into compliance, but their silence had still allowed the problem to fester. One by one, Malik called them in. He laid out the evidence. He listened to their excuses. And then he made it clear Tech Vision would no longer tolerate toxic leadership. Linda and the others were suspended indefinitely and required to undergo strict behavioral training before even being considered for reinstatement. Public apologies were issued. Internal structures were rebuilt. Malik wanted every employee to understand that integrity was non-negotiable. But just as important as removing the poison was recognizing those who had kept the company afloat. Angela, the tireless accountant who had held everything together despite the chaos, was promoted. Her salary was increased, and she was given the authority she had always deserved. Henry, the quiet force in IT who had single-handedly resolved crisis after crisis, was made the new team lead. No longer overlooked, his expertise would now guide major company decisions. And Malik? He had learned a hard lesson. Power wasn't just about making decisions from the top. It was about being present, listening, understanding the people who made the company run. So, he implemented sweeping changes, regular employee feedback sessions, an anonymous reporting system, and a leadership accountability program. No more favoritism. No more silence. No more hidden struggles. Tech Vision would not just recover. It would become stronger than ever. A new beginning. One evening, Malik stood in his office, gazing out at the city skyline. The weight of the past few weeks had been immense, but for the first time in a long time, he felt lighter. He had faced betrayal, He had uncovered deep flaws in his company, and he had nearly lost everything. But now, TechVision has a second chance. And this time, Malik would make sure no one was left unheard.